Hello, welcome for a new episode of Far From Home, a talk with a friend abroad. This new week, this Wednesday, we have a friend from abroad, from Singapore. If you have seen like the preview, he's actually living between like Malta, Vietnam, and Singapore. So welcome, Federico.
Thank you very much. Hi, Viviana. Hi, everybody. Good evening, actually, from here. It is 10 p.m.
Yes, good evening, yes. So thank you for joining us. And I'm really happy and excited because you have a lot to share, and especially also thanks to your Asian experience. I think there is a lot that we can learn from your experience. And I would like to ask you to start, how and why you ended up in Singapore? Was it planned? It wasn't planned? I know it's a kind of a story.
I'm a lawyer, so I tend not to be very short in my answers, but I'll try and be as short as possible.
We want to learn all the story.
Okay, so it was sort of planned. The answer is yes and no. I was in Italy. Now, for those of you that don't know about me, I live in Malta. I spend most of my time between Malta and Vietnam. But I was in Italy when hell broke loose in Italy. We're talking about the end of February. Those of you that are from Italy will be familiar with the cases in Codogno in northern Italy. Those occurred around the 21st, 22nd. I'm shouting because it is thundering. There is a massive thunderstorm here. I don't know if you can hear the thunders, but it's really impressive. I mean, we know that the asteroid is passing by the Earth.
Yes,
so, sorry about the distraction, but basically, distraction and destruction. Anyway, so I live between Malta and Vietnam, and I was supposed to go back to Vietnam, also for some paperwork on top of some personal stuff. But basically, we're changing offices in Vietnam, etc. I won't bore you with the details. So I was supposed to remain in Italy for about a week. I went there for a course, very interesting one, in Riccione. And then I decided to simply anticipate my flight to Asia. And usually when I go to Asia, I fly through Singapore. Why? Because here in Singapore, we have the headquarters of my firm. So my firm is based in Singapore, Vietnam, and Malta. Even though I'm Italian, I'm qualified in Italy as an Italian lawyer, and I'm a member of the Milan Bar. So yeah, I was supposed to go back to Vietnam. I came here to Singapore. I decided to isolate myself for a couple of weeks, even though it was not mandatory at the time. It was, though, mandatory for Vietnam not to enter the country if you had been to a high-risk area like Italy. So that was exactly my case. At the time, Vietnam and other countries closed the borders only to people that were coming from high-risk areas like Italy or China at the time. So I isolated myself in Singapore for a couple of weeks. And then when it was about time that I went back to Vietnam, I could not because Vietnam was sealed off. So I was stranded here, remained here. Of course, Malta, as you all know, is now closed up. The same happens to any other country in the world. So I find myself stranded here, which is nice on the one hand, of course, because it is a very safe place. They're handling the situation quite well. Many of you might know that there have been many cases in the past few weeks here in Singapore, but most of these cases are confined to the foreign workers' dormitories. So under a humanitarian standpoint, of course, this is a bad thing that we had such a number of cases here in Singapore, but reality is that in the city, we only have, tonight, I was just checking the news right now, and tonight we only had 11 cases in the city. So it's really small for a country of almost 6 million people. Mm-hmm. It is close to nothing. So that means that the measures are really working. So yes, I found myself here, and I'm stranded here until God knows when. But this is bad from one side, on the one hand, because I cannot travel, I cannot see my dear ones, my family, etc. But on the other hand, it is a good opportunity for me to be here in Singapore. At least I'm in the place where our main office is, and I can work from here, and I'm developing a lot of new opportunities online. So it's all very good. I mean, considering how bad the situation is, I am definitely privileged to be here.
Yes. Do you think that also, like, the number of cases is also, because there is a lot of discussion and also information online, the countries that are doing better is because of the experience of previous experiences of like any epidemic or SARS or something. Do you think that for Singapore is it the case actually, or
Yes,
there is
of course.
something?
No, of course. The places that I know, so Singapore and Vietnam, have a dramatic experience that dates back to 2003 with the SARS epidemic, and then with the H1N1 in 2009, I think. So they are aware of the risks of these pandemics, and they know how to curb them. In fact, Vietnam, with limited resources compared to countries like Singapore and others, managed, at least officially, if you trust the numbers of Vietnam, but I tend to trust them, they managed to curb the epidemic quite well. And that is due to the fact that since day one, they sealed off the country. They closed it. Nobody was able to come from China. In fact, the very first cases that they had in Vietnam came from China. And the second wave was represented by people that came back to Vietnam from Europe. But apparently they didn't have any case in Vietnam, any local cases, any local clusters. And the same could be said about Singapore. So since day one, what they did was to isolate patients that were positive to COVID-19. And the idea was simply not to saturate intensive care units. Exactly the opposite of what we did in Italy.
Yes, unfortunately. So you have mentioned that, like, from a work perspective, was not a big challenge. But what are, if you can think about maybe some like personal or maybe other professional challenges that you have faced since the beginning of the pandemic, or something that you are facing now? Before starting the chat, we were like, we don't know when we will be able to get back to either Malta, Italy, Vietnam, and
oh, it is a massive challenge also under a personal standpoint. So I'm not trying to underestimate the consequences of this pandemic, also on a personal level. It is hard indeed. I am a very social person. I like hanging out. I remember when the two of us met
yes.
at Club 99 in Valletta. So I am a person that really enjoys human interaction, and certainly that cannot be replaced by a video call. As much as this is enjoyable, it does not replace being in person together, sharing a drink, a meal, or simpler conversation across a boardroom table. So definitely it is hard on a personal standpoint. I would love to see my family, my dear ones, my friends, etc. And that is hard, evidently. But basically, humans are animals that tend to be resilient, and they like any animals, we look for survival. We try and survive. So it would be foolish right now. It would be legal, first of all, but it would also be foolish to, and impossible under a practical standpoint, but it would be foolish to simply travel and not abide by the norms that have been implemented by various governments in order to curb the infection. So we cope with that, and we find the positive aspects in whatever is negative. I see a great example for me is my parents. My parents are super active. They have great stamina. They're in their 70s, but they're super active. They walk as much as they can in the garden. Before the hard lockdown in Italy, they managed to still go to the mountains, go for walks, hikes, etc. So you do what you can with the resources that you have. Now, I know it's easy to speak like that if you're not facing imminent threat, and that is what a lot of companies and families and households are facing all around the world. There are some heartbreaking news all over the world of people that are forced to close down their businesses. They are not able to pay for their rents, their bills, etc. So it's really bad. And so I should only be grateful that so far I'm able to afford to do all these things. So I have a deep sense of gratitude. I have great examples at home. I am surrounded virtually by great people, great intellects. I'm learning a lot from a number of people recently, academics, doctors, lawyers, etc. So I take the positive out of it. But yes, of course, it is hard. And it is also harder under a professional standpoint. Because yes, I managed to, I've always traveled a lot for work. So I'm not used to staying at the office from 9 to 5. I'm not a 1 to 5 person. It is very challenging. It was already very challenging to be able to work without a fixed routine before. It is possibly even harder now. Yes, I'm trying to work online as much as possible, like all of us. But evidently, of course, there has been a slowdown in a number of activities. If we mentioned Vietnam earlier, I had some pretty important prospective clients for Vietnam, but Vietnam is a chiefly industrial place. So these potential clients cannot visit the country and inspect the production sites, meet with their business partners, etc. My business cannot grow with them or with theirs. So yes, of course, there have been some negative effects on the business, but I'm trying to curb them with new things like publications, video conferences, webinars, educational initiatives, etc.
Yeah. I think you mentioned some important points that I would like to highlight. One also we discussed before. I think the importance also of routine, or not having a routine, but having something to keep you healthy. You mentioned before, just maybe even a walk, or having your orange juice every morning, fresh orange juice. You take some fresh air.
Oh, yes. I'll show you something if you allow me.
Okay, yes, please. That is what we like the most.
This is my daily motivation tool. I work out on a daily. I know it's not particularly sexy. It's purple, but anyway.
This purple is a nice color.
Yeah, I work out. No, but I work out on a daily basis. So I don't have a gym here. I'm living in a service apartment here in Singapore, and there would be a gym that is, of course, closed because gyms are quite dangerous for the infection. But yes, I keep my body healthy. I work out daily. I'm eating healthily. Here in Singapore, you can go out for essential needs, but you don't have to justify you going out. So I try and go for a short walk, like 10 minutes, 20 minutes maximum every day. There is an orange juice vending machine nearby. So every day I like having my orange juice every morning. So what I do is I go for my fresh orange juice every morning. I have it and I go back, and that's a healthy habit. At least I get some vitamin D from the sun. And yeah, I keep these healthy habits. But sorry for interrupting you. You were listening.
No, I think that was exactly also the point, because we are also kind of appreciate the small things, or understand what are the small things that make us to find our balance and routine and help us going. Then you mentioned also learning. That is another also resource. I think it's something we are really, there are a lot of webinars, free webinars, and it's also a resource that we are trying to use the most, maybe in our field, but also maybe in other fields, just to explore and to travel with the mind, because we cannot travel physically.
Yeah, of course. Oh, yes, I'm getting somehow exhausted by how much I learn. That is, I never truly relax watching a film or something stupid, or just browsing Facebook or stuff like that. I always try and find, or I'm bombarded by very interesting information, or at least something which is interesting for me. It is not necessarily useful under a work perspective, but it is interesting. So just before connecting with you, I was watching a short documentary on the 30 Years' War. Now that has no impact whatsoever on my profession, but it's interesting. So I was not doing anything foolish to simply relax my mind. At times, I have to say that one of the drawbacks of being such a curious person at times is that you keep your brain always active. Sometimes I should simply switch off, go to bed, and that's it.
Yes, I totally agree. I'm experimenting the same. So when I have also people to suggest me a webinar, stop, please. I already had my dose today.
Yeah.
And then you also mentioned, I think, two important concepts. One is resilience. And with some friends of mine, we discussed, I think for the last maybe past couple of years, that sometimes was a kind of an overrated word. But I think that now is actually the moment when we are really seeing resilience at work. And we have to become and to be resilient, to find right resources to be resilient. As individuals, as companies, as countries. So it's yes, we have discussed, let's say, theoretically about resilience before, or resilience in some specific country affected by wars or something, but now is actually when we have to put resilience in place.
I totally agree.
Mm-hmm. And the other point is also, I think, is also in a couple of other talks. There was this idea of also being grateful, and because we are forced to something, to be locked in our houses, or we don't have the same freedom that we had before, but one is to protect us, And two, we are locked down, but in nice apartment with good Wi-Fi, with a lot of, again, information and opportunities. So actually we are lucky, and it could be worse, and we know it is worse in some countries, or for some people in countries, and also the way that it affected companies and families in a different way. So of course there is something that is really, really bad and dramatic, but at the same time, if we also consider maybe ourselves or some of the people that we know, it isn't the, like, we are lucky, and we have to be also grateful for what we have, and we took for granted so far.
Oh yes, absolutely. Yeah. Yes, I'm very grateful for what I have, and also for the small things and for the small pleasures. Like, I don't know, I ordered some good food from a delivery place a couple of nights ago, and I was happy for that. Of course, it doesn't replace going out with your friends to a beautiful restaurant, but at least I was able to afford something nice, and I thought I enjoyed it here in the small flat that I'm staying at. So yeah, of course.
Good. So I don't know if there is any other, I think, resources that you think you would like to share.
Well, I posted a video a while ago on Facebook describing my situation, and that was when I was still hoping to go to Vietnam, which unfortunately did not materialize.
I contacted you actually, that video.
Okay, and I recorded the video wearing a suit and tie, so I'm very informal tonight with you. I'm not wearing a tie, but I think that at least for me, it works really well to maintain a certain, if you want, elegance, or simply to dress up. If I wear a suit, I'm more productive. I'm in a small room, I could just wear my PJs all day long, but I would feel shabby and I would feel lazy. So I think that it definitely, for me and people like me, if you are professional, if you tend to dress up out of respect, not just for yourself, but also for the people that you meet or e-meet with your conferencing, webinars, etc. I think that really does a trick to dress up. Now, that is, of course, very subjective. You can be dressed up wearing a t-shirt, depending on the industry that you work in. But I think it really works. So I would like to share this with our audience. Dressing up, wearing a jacket, a blazer, a tie, if you're a man, or something like that, works.
Yeah, I think what was really great, because again, it's something that it seems a small thing, but can really make a difference.
Of course. I wouldn't be as productive if I were wearing my PJs.
Exactly. I'm kind of the same. I also need to be.
You're very smart. I mean, from what I can you
Yes. And the last point I would like to discuss with you is also based on your experience in some in Southeast Asia. And because now we're starting discussing about the new normal, the next normal, the phase 2, the phase 3. There is something that you think, based on the experience of the Asian country, we can learn and adapt, but with a change in our mindset, because actually the differences are also in the cultures and in the mindset. So now we're kind of need to adopt some behaviors or some way of living and working that are not ours in the Western countries, let's say, or in Italy at least.
They're not even Asian. That is, those of you that follow us that have been to Asian cities know that these cities are super cramped, and they are some of the most highly dense populated cities in the world, and that has come to change. I think that if you want to draw a positive conclusion from the experience, broadly speaking, of Southeast Asian nations, and I would also include Taiwan, which is not, technically speaking, in Southeast Asia, I would say, first of all, the political class is well respected, not simply because of the hierarchical power that it exerts over the population, but also because it is well selected in the first place. So you have people who are more or less prepared. Now, of course, every country has problems. I'm not hiding, there is corruption in Asia, everybody knows that. There is at times provincialism even in Asia, etc. But generally speaking, we have a political class which is decently prepared and that gives very clear messages. And as a society, society tends to trust the political elite, and they feel, I'm speaking from an Italian perspective, so probably this is different in countries like Scandinavia or even Malta.
Even Malta, yes.
But there is a feeling that you're doing something for your community. So people don't go to work and prefer staying at home, even if they're allowed to go to work in certain countries, or they wear a mask or do all these things, or they download the tracing app, not just because the government asks them to do so, but because they feel that they're doing their part for the community. I'm not trying to idolize Asian societies in any way. I think that there are many flaws in Asian societies vis-a-vis European and Western ones. But having said that, we can learn that from them. That is, do your part in your small community for the greater good of society. Mm-hmm. And it's easy to say, well, some of these governments barely have an opposition in place that could, say something against the government itself and its decisions. But I would say that generally speaking, in the population, there is this ingrained belief that the government is somehow acting for the common good, and they act individually as such.
Yes. Yes.
So in terms of practical things, what we can learn is that they acted fast. I mentioned that earlier. Vietnam sealed off its borders with China since day one. Vietnam, if we trust the numbers, and as I said, I tend to trust Vietnamese numbers when it comes to this, because there is a lot of social control. So if you have your grandmother almost dying because of COVID-19, you would know. In Vietnam, it is something that wouldn't be hidden by authorities. But this is what I'm trying to say. So numbers may be higher in Vietnam, but they wouldn't be that higher than those that are officially reported on official channels. So Vietnam sealed off since day one. Now, what we did not do in Europe, not even in Malta. Now, Malta is responding very well, but I think that there was also a bit of luck in Malta, because I remember that when I myself came to Singapore, my friends in Malta were still partying in Patcherville. They were still meeting up. They were still holding their meetings, business meetings, etc. They were still traveling in a state of denial, which is something that we experienced in Italy as well, and in other European nations. Initially, it was something exotic confined to China. Then it was something exotic confined to Italy. And eventually it became a pandemic. So the lessons that we can draw is that when it comes to a pandemic, you have to act fast, immediately. Secondly, don't compromise. I mean, isolate the sick and don't let those that are positive infect other people, which is exactly what happened in Italy, unfortunately, as well in the US. The United States are following precisely the Italian pattern, contrary to what is happening in other European countries, in other Western countries. Yes, very simple measures like wearing a mask whenever you go out. Masks are available in Singapore. I believe also in Malta, in Vietnam, etc. We're not facing these shortages and scandals that we're experiencing in Italy. Social distancing, it worked. So I would like to, probably we didn't touch on this on the live stream. We talked about it earlier, but here in Singapore, we're experiencing a surge in the number of cases. But that is limited to the people, to the poor people that work in the foreign workers' dormitories. And it is mostly people from the Indian subcontinent. So while this is a human tragedy and a health tragedy, I would like to reassure people not just about my safety and the safety of others that live in Singapore, but I would also like to reiterate the fact that Singapore's measures worked. Today we had 11 cases only in Singapore, in the city. So yes, we had 690 cases today, but the overall majority occurred in dormitories where people are cramped in rooms that host tens of people in not exactly the best hygienic conditions. And something bad, I would like to break the news to you all in Europe. In these dormitories, you don't have air conditioning. So don't blame air conditioning for spreading the virus, and don't hope too much that the hot weather in summer is going to impact the virus. At least this did not happen in Singapore. Maybe the virus is going to mutate in Europe, we hope so. Maybe it will lose its power, etc. But reality is that in a country like Singapore, which is a tropical country, an equatorial country actually, with over 30 degrees Celsius on an average basis every day. And probably in these rooms, you will experience 38, 40 degrees maybe, no air conditioning, humidity, etc. The virus is spreading. So sorry, folks.
Yeah. Yes, no, thank you. That was really interesting. Also, what you mentioned some at the beginning, there are also some of the, let's say, cultural dimension that we explain when we do intercultural management. And actually now they're proving in some Asian country or country that are working. One is like the power distance. So you recognize kind of the authority. So then you follow the rules by the authorities, historical reason, and also, let's say, cultural reason. The other is the collectivism, so the group before the individual, while in our countries and in some Western countries more than in others is the individual and or the freedom of the individual before the collectivity. And then the uncertainty avoidance, and this is something I always mention, because when you live in uncertainty and in a society that want to avoid uncertainty, like Italy, that is a high level of uncertainty avoidance, what you don't want is unclear indications, unclear regulation. What you need is a clear, just the truth, one real, rules and one or something to follow, but there are something, well, what is happening is actually a lot of, let's say, not clear rules that had then an impact on all the uncertainty, and it generates more like more confusion and even more uncertainty.
I mean, here in Singapore, just to give you an example, we have a Telegram channel, a WhatsApp channel, and they give regular updates. They give examples. They give positive examples. They tell heartwarming stories of people that help somebody else. They tell negative stories of people that, for instance, got arrested because they were spreading fake news, etc. But the main goal is to spread communication from the government, which is extremely clear. Even in terms of style, I mean, the Prime Minister of Singapore, Prime Minister Lee, delivers his addresses to the nation on his own. He's not surrounded by reporters and other people. Most of the, even his profile picture on his official channels, like on Facebook, etc., he's portrayed wearing a mask. So yes, probably what is lacking in many European countries is politics. That is, you have a lot of very bright individuals. In Italy, we know them for sure. There are so many bright individuals in Italy in every field. We have brilliant doctors, we have brilliant economists, etc. But what is lacking is politics. That is clear decision, a compromise between what the doctors say, what the economists say, what businesses, or what business stakeholders are saying, etc. Here, politics shows control. It shows that the situation is in their hands. They have it under control. They have provided they have provided a massive economic stimulus to companies here. They are subsidizing salaries. They are providing washable, reusable masks to every resident of Singapore. They have installed gels at the entrance of every building. There is even more than one distributor per building. So, for instance, here where I live, there is a distributor at the entrance. There is one at the reception. There is one at the other at the office. There are two in the lifts, one per lift. And even in some floors, you can see some distributors of gel. So I don't even have to buy it because I have it there. So yeah, I bought it just out of curiosity. I bought a small bottle for myself. But you can actually get it for free. If you are a permanent resident of Singapore, you can queue up using the app, keeping social distance, physical distance, etc. I don't like the term social distance, by the way. You can just refill your bottle free of charge simply by registering, and that's it. So politics did act. You may criticize some actions taken by politics, but politicians did act, and they acted swiftly and quickly.
Thank you. That was really interesting. You know, we are kind of at the end of our talk, and last part of the talk is this idea of like addressing your country, your family, your friends in your own language. So
not Maltese.
If you want to say something in Maltese, feel free. If you want to say something in Vietnamese, feel free. Or if you want to say something in Italian,
I will say that. I live in Malta, but I'm Italian. I will always be Italian at heart, and Italy is my country. So yes, I would say this in Italian: siate responsabili. it is difficult to translate this in English. Be responsible, but also be accountable. Non fate troppa polemica, non crediate le fake news, siate responsabili nella ricerca di informazioni e nell'elaborazione delle informazioni stesse, e seguite Viviana, che è un mentore serio.
Grazie.
E crescete, insomma, la responsabilità è composta da tanti fattori, no? La responsabilità è l'elemento preordinato alla libertà. Quindi prima si è responsabili e poi si è liberi. Senza responsabilità non c'è libertà. So if you want me to translate it into English, be responsible, be accountable if you want to be free. Don't fall for what you would like to believe. Follow the right mentors, follow the right gurus, follow the right instructors, follow Viviana, her coaching, her tools, and only then can you elaborate pieces of information and therefore be free.
Grazie Federico, sono, come dire, d'accordissimo, e finisco con un pezzo in italiano che poi traduco in inglese. Credo sia molto importante quello che hai detto, responsabilità, e anche su seguire le informazioni e la condivisione di informazioni, e questo è anche un po' l'idea di questi talk, anche per condividere esperienze vere e non sentirsi anormali o strani nel nostro vivere le nostre fatiche o trovare le nostre risorse all'estero. So thank you very much, Federico.
Thank you, grazie Hafna, to you and our friends in Malta.
Thank you, good night.
Thank you, have a good afternoon and a pleasant evening.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, take care, bye-bye.